The 2025 wide receiver draft class is a noticeable step down from 2024. With that said, there are still plenty of extremely talented players that I think will be productive members in the NFL. So in this video, let's go ahead and give my rankings of the top 10 wide receivers in the upcoming 2025 NFL draft. But if you guys do go on to enjoy the video, hit the like and subscribe button. We just hit 10K, so thank you guys so much. Let's hop into it. Now, before we get into our official top 10, I do want to hand out one honorable mention, and that's going to go to Savion Williams. I love his size. I love his speed and athleticism. It's just, he's a very raw player that has not been extremely productive in college football. So until we kind of could see what he can do in the draft combine and whatnot, I just couldn't quite put him in my top 10. At number 10, I'm going to have Jalen Royals out of Utah State. Now, the one thing I'll say about Jalen Royals is, playing at Utah State, you're not going up against the greatest competition, but when he was given opportunities, I thought that he played lights out in his time at Utah State. 6 foot, around 205 pounds, but probably could run like a 4.37, 4.38, maybe if we're lucky 4.36. This is a legitimately great athlete. What stands out the most about Jalen Royals to me is that I think his deep routes are just incredible. His post, his comeback routes, I think are some of the best that I think are in this draft class. What does leave to be desired is, again, the competition level at Utah State wasn't very good. He also can have some concentration drops. His blocking could use a little bit of work, and his releases from the line are something that is going to need to be developed. Underneath routes, short routes, intermediate routes, those sort of things are right now a little bit inconsistent. You want to kind of hone that in to become a lot better at it. But in terms of his ability to make adjustments to the ball, I think he has great body control. 50-50 catches, he can win those. He has great vertical speed. His vertical production at Utah State was very productive. I think he had 7 touchdowns of 50+ yards. So you're going to get somebody who very fast, very good size, very good body control, needs to just kind of work on a couple things, and I think this is somebody that can be a really good wide receiver 3 to maybe bordering on becoming a wide receiver 2. At number 9 is going to be Jack Betch. Now, Jack Betch, around 6'2", 215, coming out of TCU. One thing I'll say about Jack Betch, and this is not a pro comparison, but just in terms of play style, I think he's going to need to translate his game to very much becoming like a Chris Godwin type of guy. I heard a comparison, a couple videos that I've seen, and I feel like it's a really solid comparison because in a lot of ways, they're similar players. Really good size, really good frame, extremely reliable hands. They're not going to drop too many things. Very good route runner, especially in the underneath sort of stuff. The main comparison I would suppose would be both of them have very limited acceleration. They're not extremely fast players. Chris Godwin is somebody who does a lot of his work underneath, but you're not going to see him do too much in terms of vertical and getting vertical, whether it's a post or whether it's just a straight up vertical route. You're just not really going to see a whole lot from Chris Godwin here, and that's kind of what I think the same sort of vibe is with Jack Betch. Like, this is somebody who's going to do a lot of his work in the slot, underneath, in the intermediate stuff. I don't really see him being somebody who you're going to see run a whole lot of deep routes just because he doesn't have incredible speed, acceleration, or anything like that. But in terms of what he brings to the table, again, you're looking at somebody who has really good route running, very reliable hands. He is a chains mover, very good, big sized body. Again, I think he's going to be sort of a big slot receiver who can be played kind of like, I don't know, Travis Kelce, Chris Godwin, those type of guys. Those players that are just kind of unguardable because they're just always open in the underneath stuff. Like, you have to double team them underneath, but you're not too worried about them going deep because they just don't have the acceleration or the speed to quite get there. I do think Jack Betch is going to be a really good player in the NFL. I don't think he'll ever be a wide receiver 1, but he could be a quality wide receiver 2 to a really good wide receiver 3. At number 8 is going to be Trey Harris. Now, Trey Harris, to be honest with you, is one of the hardest players to rank in this draft class just because the opinions of him vary so much. You go through some analysts and they're going to have them inside their top 25. Some people have him in their top 50. Other analysts don't even have them in their top 100. He is such a bizarre prospect that you either love or you don't like. I'm kind of in the middle on this one. I like Trey Harris, but I do see some of his limitations. Let's begin with the positive. 6'3", 200 something pounds. I mean, this dude is a great size wide receiver at the NFL level. You're going to look at him and you're going to see flashbacks of AJ Brown and DK Metcalf, even though he probably won't be as good as those guys. You will see the physical stature of this guy and be like, yeah, that looks like an Ole Miss wide receiver. His speed for his size, I wouldn't say is elite, but given the fact he is 6'3", this is somebody who's probably going to run like a 4.4 for a very low 4.5. Like, he's going to be fast enough at the NFL level. This is somebody who I think is going to be playing on the outside. You're probably not going to see him too much inside the slot. He's going to be an X wide receiver who's going to make a lot of plays down the field. That's probably the best thing that I could say about him. Contested catches, red zone catches, deep balls. Like, this guy is kind of a monster with those things. And kind of talking about his speed here, he doesn't doesn't have the greatest acceleration, especially when he gets off the line of scrimmage. This is somebody who kind of can start his routes off a little bit slow, which can sometimes give him issues in press man coverage against more physical corners. So when he goes up against a Sauce Gardner or Jalen Ramsey, I could definitely see him struggling early on. Play speed, kind of talked about that earlier, is a little bit limited. The thing that for me kind of gives me the most drawback on him as a prospect is his route running just needs a lot of work. When it comes to the nuances that you see from guys like Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, he just doesn't quite have that yet. But because of how big and physical in stature he is and his ability to just make whatever catch downfield, and this is a red zone monster, like this guy needs to be targeted in the red zone because he can just make so many plays. He is going to be somebody who is going to be a quarterback's best friend, kind of similar in some ways to George Pickens, where Pickens may not be the greatest route runner, but you just give him an opportunity and he's going to make some plays. That's kind of what I think Trey Harris can do, but I do think Trey Harris is very limited with the route running, which I think is going to give him some issues early on. So for now, I think he's going to be a quality wide receiver too, but if he develops at a rapid pace, I could see him being a wide receiver 1 at some point in his career. That is best case scenario though. At number 7 is going to be Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State. Around 6'4", 200 something pounds. Jaden Higgins is somebody who presents an ideal size for somebody who is going to be a wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 in the NFL. He's somebody who you probably want this guy to be the first guy off the bus because of how physically imposing he is. Like, this dude is chiseled. He is ridiculously ripped. One thing I'll say about him, he doesn't necessarily have the greatest speed. So in terms of somebody like a Jalen Royals or some other players we'll talk about later in this draft, you're not going to quite get that level of speed with Jaden Higgins, but you're getting the size, the catch radius. For his size, I think he's an excellent route runner. He also, in my opinion, is somebody that has improved consistently throughout his career from his freshman year all the way now to this most recent year. I feel like every single year he has gotten consistently better. He's excellent when you go up against zone coverage. This is a guy who just has incredible spatial awareness. He's got great hands. He's got good route running. Run blocking is going to be something that needs a lot of work. I mean, he is just straight up not very good at it, which is kind of weird for somebody who's as long and big as somebody like Jaden Higgins. He's definitely going to need some of that work to be done. I talked about this earlier. He doesn't have the game breaking speed of a Xavier Worthy or those sort of guys. He's a little bit slower, which is going to be an issue for him in terms of creating separation. And when it comes down to releasing off the line of scrimmage, he also does struggle with that, kind of similar to guys like Trey Harris and other players, even though I do think Jaden Higgins has a higher potential to be better because of just how big he is. When he gets on press man coverage, he can definitely get his steps kind of mixed up a little bit, which could kind of throw his routes a little bit off. But when he does get free releases or when he does get off the line of scrimmage at a very high level with his route running, with his catch radius, this is somebody that is going to kind of create some separation and make some plays. It's just that he's going to need some refinement with this game. Run blocking is going to have to be a complete overhaul, and his releases are something that are going to be definitely something that needs to be fixed. But if he can fix those things, I think that Jaden Higgins could be an excellent player in the NFL. I view him as somebody with a ceiling of being a low tier wide receiver 1, but an excellent wide receiver 2. I do think in the NFL level, he's going to be somebody who needs to be played along a wide receiver 1, maybe like a CeeDee Lamb or I don't know, a DK Metcalf, or I guess a Jackson Smith and Jigba nowadays. Jaden Higgins is somebody that is going to be a wide receiver 2 in the league and can be a great wide receiver 2 for many years to come. Moving on to number 6, I got Alec Ayamanor, around 6'2", but looks a little bit taller than that, but around 6'2", around 200 pounds. Somebody that feels like he has the total package, but has one major flaw that is going to be something that he is going to have to work on. He's got very strong hands. He's very physically imposing, great route runner. He's physical. He has good ball tracking. He's going to be somebody who could win those 50-50 balls, catches the balls with his hands, which I'm a huge fan of. I mean, this is somebody that he can catch everything, whether it's short, deep, every sort of thing you want him to do, he can do it. I think he's got great speed for his size, but this is the major drawback with Alec Ayamanor. This dude just does not create separation at a high level. There's a couple of reasons why. Number one, he's just so good at being physical with corners and safeties that he doesn't sometimes have to create separation, but in the NFL level, you're going to have to create separation if you're going to want to have chances at the NFL level. I also think in terms of like route running, while I think he's a good route runner, I do think when it comes to like making sharp cuts and whatnot, he could be a little bit better at. He's a little bit rounding the edges, which is something you want to see, especially because that does help create separation. I think for somebody of his size, he's a good enough route runner that if he could just refine his nuances a little bit better, he could be somebody that can generate separation. It's just right now doesn't get a lot of separations, which for him at the college level was totally fine because he was just better than everyone and had better physical tools than everyone. At the NFL level, if you want to beat a Jair Alexander, you want to beat a Jalen Ramsey or some of these great corners in the NFL, you gotta find ways to create some separation or else you're gonna kind of get smoked. I think for Alec, it's gonna be a bit of a learning curve early on. I think ideally he's gonna play alongside an excellent wide receiver 1 and develop underneath them. Alec Amador, I view him as starting off as a true wide receiver 2 with potential to become a really good wide receiver 1 in the NFL. And I think a perfect situation for him would be play alongside, again, a CeeDee Lamb, even maybe go to Green Bay if Devontae Adams goes there again. You can learn from Devontae Adams. That would make a bunch of sense. I think Alec Amador is going to be a great player, just needs a little bit of time to develop in terms of separation, which is his major issue. Number 5 is going to be Matthew Golden from Texas. Now, Matthew Golden is somebody who has been shotting up. He's been rising draft boards insanely these past couple weeks. This was somebody who was not even considered to be a top 10 wide receiver until like the back stretch of the season for Texas, but he was so good in the playoffs and so good to end the season for Texas that he really got a chance to show off who he truly is. And people started to notice, and rightfully so, because he is an excellent player. This is a bit of a learning curve for me because for Matthew Golden, I was a huge fan of him early on in the season. I thought he had potential to become a top draft pick in the draft. I never committed to him being a top 10 wide receiver until I started seeing everyone else do it. So note to self, if I have confidence in a player, make sure I put them in my top 10 wide receivers or start putting them in draft boards to manifest them getting drafted, which in this case, it did happen for Matthew Golden. Matthew Golden is around 6 foot, probably a little bit lighter than 200 pounds, elite speed. I think he's one of the best route runners in this year's draft class. He can win 50-50 balls, even though he probably won't be able to do it as much in the NFL level because of his size. Elite speed, great route running, can win 50-50 balls, very reliable catcher. I mean, this is somebody at Texas that just caught everything. For Texas, the reason why it took him so long to kind of develop into becoming the true wide receiver 1, had Isaiah Bond, and everyone thought, oh, Isaiah Bond is going to be the number 1 guy. And unfortunately for Isaiah Bond, he had some injuries and just things didn't go his way in Texas. So kind of sat out a couple games. And then, of course, you had the Jonte Cook situation, which then gave Matthew Golden even more opportunities to display his talent. And by the end of the season, he was Quinn Ewers' number 1 go-to guy. When he went out in the game against Ohio State, it was like the Texas offense had no receiving game outside of like Gunnar Helm. I mean, Matthew Golden is an excellent wide receiver who may be a little bit limited because of his overall production, because he just had like half a good season at Texas, but he's somebody who I think can be used in special teams on punt returns, on kick returns. He has good speed. He's probably going to run around a 4.3. I don't really see any drawbacks with him outside of maybe the fact that he isn't necessarily the biggest, most physically imposing wide receiver, but he's just going to be an excellent wide receiver who I think can be a wide receiver 1 to a very, very good wide receiver 2. And number 4 is going to be Luther Burden. Now, I love Luther Burden because of his track speed. I mean, this dude is ridiculously fast. His change of direction is incredible. He's extremely twitchy. As a blocker, this is somebody who's really good as a blocker as well. I mean, he just looks like an absolute dog out there. A versatile piece, so you can use either outside, put him in the slot, throw him wherever you want him to. He can excel there. His production in 2024 was a little bit limited, and that was mainly because the quarterback play was just not very good at Missouri this year. Sometimes focus drops have become an issue for him that I think definitely are something that you want to see fixed in the NFL, though I don't typically take too much from that. One issue he's going to have to look to address is the route running thing, and I think the thing with Luther Burden that kind of holds me back on him is I view him as somebody who can either be incredibly great at the NFL level, or he's going to be kind of just mediocre. Like, this is somebody for me who he has all the tools necessarily, and I think that he has the ability to be excellent at the wide receiver or at the NFL level. Like, he could be an excellent wide receiver 1, or he could just be not very good, which is kind of the interesting thing about Luther Burden. Like, most of these receivers, I kind of feel like I know what I'm getting from them, either their ceiling or their floor. For Luther Burden, the ceiling is one of the best receivers in the NFL, but the floor is maybe out of the league within 5 years. It's just kind of the weird thing with Luther Burden, although I think he's going to be an excellent wide receiver. He's got good deep ball tracking. I mean, the dude is incredible. If you see him run a slot fade, I mean, it's just ridiculous. He can make those plays all day long. Good speed, good size. I think he's going to be a good player. That's why I have him at number 4. The reason why I have Emeka Egbuka above him at number 3 is just because I think Emeka Egbuka is a much safer pick. Now, the issue for Emeka Egbuka is he doesn't necessarily have like an elite trait. His best elite trait is probably the fact that he is just damn good at everything. I mean, he is so consistent, but I think because he doesn't quite have like an elite trait, he's not the fastest, he doesn't have the biggest catch radius, he's not the tallest, he's not the most physically imposing. Route running is okay, it's not great. Oh, I should say it's okay, it's really good, but not great, which I think can somewhat limited the potential of who he can be. I don't ever think that Emeka Egbuka is ever going to be a true wide receiver 1, but I think as a wide receiver 2, you are going to have this guy be on your team for the next 15 years, and you can love the fact that you you have him. I view him very similar in light to like Jackson Smith and Jigba, even though I would say that Jackson Smith and Jigba probably was a better prospect than Emeka Egbuka. I kind of view them pretty similar to one another, where I don't know if JSN is quite yet somebody who could be a wide receiver one, or if he is a wide receiver one, he needs an excellent wide receiver two, like a DK Metcalf. It's kind of what I think with Emeka Egbuka, but fortunately, with where he's projected to get drafted to, you're looking at situations like the LA Chargers, the Denver Broncos, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and all of those teams I feel like have a good wide receiver one that would allow Emeka Egbuka to excel. He's probably someone who's going to play a little bit on the slot. He has some versatility. I don't really think he has a necessary flaw. It's just that he isn't quite elite at anything, which is fine. I mean, I think Emeka Egbuka is going to be a great player. He's going to be an excellent wide receiver two to a low tier wide receiver one. Then at number 2, I'm going to put Travis Hunter here. Now, people are going to say, well, Travis Hunter isn't a wide receiver. He's going to play corner. I have a feeling he's probably going to try to play both at the NFL level. I think if I was him, I would go full-time as corner and focus in simply on that. And if it doesn't work out, then go full-time at wide receiver. But I don't think that's what he's going to do. I do think he's going to try to play both positions, which we'll see how that works out. Travis Hunter is a freak athlete. He can win every single 50-50 ball that he wants to. His body control is just next level. It's probably the best in this draft class. Route running could be a little bit worked on, but I mean, you just give the dude a chance, he's going to make a play. Some people say that, oh, he's just an average receiver. This dude is not. He is really an incredible receiver, an incredible talent, probably the most talented player in this year's draft class. If not him, then second. He can win 50-50 balls. I think his hands are really solid. The thing about Travis Hunter is I don't quite know what he presents as like an underneath wide receiver, which is fine because I don't think they're going to be using him like that. At the NFL level, if he does decide to go as a corner, I view Travis Hunter as somebody who's going to be used in specific packages on offense, so that way they don't wear him down and maybe shorten his career by how much playing time he's going to be getting at the NFL level if he were to play at both sides. But I do think on the offensive end, if you use him as like a pseudo wide receiver 3, this dude is going to absolutely destroy defenses. He could be a high-end level wide receiver 1 if he does choose to go that way, because he has everything in the toolbox to be great. He's got the skills, the twitchiness, the speed, the route running can be there if he goes full-time with it, the nuance is already there, the catch radius is already there, the body control is already there. It just comes down to, is he going to play wide receiver? So he's kind of hard to rank, but I do think if he does play wide receiver, he's excellent. But at number 1 is going to be Tetairoa McMillan. When you talk about ideal size, ideal speed, ideal frame, that's what you're getting from Tet McMillan. I think he's somebody who you think would be excellent at like 50-50 balls, which I do think he's fine at, but oddly enough, his skill set is something that's like, you're going to see him do a lot of things that like CeeDee Lamb would do. You'll see him do a lot of things that other wide receivers that aren't built like him are typically doing. He can run in the slot. He can go on the outside. He can do the underneath stuff. My favorite thing about Tet McMillan is that he's a hands catcher. He doesn't catch with his body. He catches everything with his hands. He attacks the ball at a very high level, which is the reason why he doesn't really have too many drops or focus drops. He's really solid with his hands. Route running is something that is going to have to be worked on for him because he's just so big and massive and can do so much with his separation. He's just ridiculous, but he doesn't quite have like the nuances of like a Devontae, CDs, so on and so forth. But his size, his frame, his speed, his athleticism just gives you so much stuff that you're going to love to see at the NFL level. I view him as somebody who has elite wide receiver 1 status, who at worst is going to be a phenomenal wide receiver 2 at the NFL level. And you just don't find guys who are as big as Tet McMillan quite often. Like, people are going to compare him to T. Higgins, and I can see the comparison. Both massive guys who could do some stuff deep, that could do some stuff underneath. You can give them a screen pass and they could take it to the house. Like, they're just such unique talents, and I'm excited to see what T. Higgins could do if he does leave Cincinnati and become a true wide receiver 1 somewhere else. And I think for Tet McMillan, we'll see if he can have a similar career. But that's going to complete my top 10 wide receivers of the 2025 NFL draft. As I said in the intro, this draft class doesn't necessarily have the Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr., Brian Thomas Jr., Rome Odunze. Like, 2024 was a complete anomaly of how many great talents there were. This year is a bit more of a realistic year where you have maybe 3 to 4 top tier guys who can be really good, and the rest are more projects that you think potentially have some chances to be good in the NFL level. But if you enjoyed, hit the like and subscribe button. Love you guys. Peace.